So, Klaus, did you ever imagine that the Swiss franc would trade at parity with the euro?
It has already once, so it's not a complete surprise. And if you look at the dollar, the exchange rate is just what it was a year ago. Of course, everybody was surprised by the decision last week of the SNB.
What went through your mind when you saw that Thomas Jordan had lifted the ceiling on the franc less than a week before the start of the annual meeting?
I have to be frank. We had a meeting of our managing board, and I predicted that it will happen because if the Swiss wanted to move, they had to move before the 22nd of this month. So for me, it was not necessarily unexpected, particularly if you look also of the exposure of the Swiss National Bank. I mean, its reserves in foreign currencies. It was clear.
You predicted this when?
I predicted it last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday?
Yeah.
So 2 days before.
2 days before.
The SNB moved. And that's because quantitative easing, we all expect quantitative easing to arrive at the ECB on the 22nd.
Exactly.
Where were you when you heard the news?
I have to think about it. I was probably doing my morning, I was at luncheon when I got the email. So the Swiss National Bank has moved.
Goodness me. And you got the email not from the Swiss National Bank?
No, from one of my colleagues.
Klaus, you're an expert on competitiveness. What does a franc at these levels mean for Switzerland?
To reinforce one of the components Switzerland owes its competitiveness already, which means innovation. Switzerland has to succeed now even more by having a service-oriented attitude, by doing it better, maybe at a higher price than the rest of the world. That's the recipe for Switzerland.
But will the rest of the world be prepared to pay for Swiss goods at these prices, for Swiss services, tourism at these prices?
Of course, you have always people who pay for quality. So I'm not so concerned about the present situation. Let's not forget we are now still in a shock phase, and we will have to see how it levels out longer term.
What does it mean for the WEF?
It means that, of course, we are also more expensive for people in the Eurozone. We are not necessarily more expensive for people in the dollar zone or for currency back to the dollar, directly or indirectly, because 1 year ago when we had our meeting, the dollar was exactly at the same exchange rate as it is today.
Won't your corporate partners, though, blanch at having to pay so much?
We have the same recipe. We have to provide our partners with the value which makes what they contribute worthwhile. And don't forget, we are today the foremost international institution for public-private cooperation. And it's not just Davos. I mean, what we offer is being integrated into a process of multi-stakeholder interaction, actually a process where business has a seat at the table.
Do you worry, though, that some will look at that figure in Swiss francs and say, it's just too rich for my blood?
Look, of course, some companies, that's natural, always will re-evaluate where they can make cost cuttings, re-evaluate it in terms of benefits also. We just made an experience. We increased, because we had expanded so much, we increased and restructured our price for our strategic partners. We included a lot of services for which they had to pay before. And we had 120 strategic partners. Now we even have more than 120. So I think it's worthwhile what we are offering.
Switzerland was always expensive, Klaus. Would you ever consider moving the annual meeting to a cheaper location?
No, Davos is an ideal place because it offers the right atmosphere. It has an ideal infrastructure in terms of the Congress House, in terms of the hotels. And do not forget, we have also locations in New York, we have locations in Tokyo and Beijing. So if we wanted to, internally, that's where the costs occur. We always can make adjustments.
Some participants have attended the annual meeting for 25 or 30 years.
I know one who has attended since 43 years.
Who's that?
That's Rahul Bajaj from India.
43 years.
That's right.
What keeps the real Davos man coming back?
I think it's the recognition that today the big issues in the world cannot be solved by business or governments or civil society only, that you have to engage. As a business leader, you have to exercise social responsibility. You cannot be, you cannot ignore the concerns of the global society. And there are still enough and even an increasing number of business leaders who feel that they have an obligation which goes beyond just making business.
Who else is on that list of stalwarts, people who've been coming back decades in and decades out?
Just come tomorrow evening to our, what we call our circle reception, where we have a reception for all those who have been here more than for 10 years ago. And I think it's now a group of 300-400 people. Whose
presence, Klaus, is going to define the annual meeting this year?
I think the recognition that Davos is not based on one or two people who come here to make a speech, but Davos, or the annual meeting, is a place where you interact. 1,600 people have an active role, but nevertheless, I know you are curious.
Well, you know.
No, I mean, of course.
Jamie Dimon, another year it was David Cameron, it could be Angela Merkel, it could be Vladimir Putin.
We don't know yet. We don't know yet, but I would say Li Keqiang, the Chinese premier, is certainly in the midst of the limelight today with the role China is playing in the global economy. Just look at the stock developments this morning in Shanghai. So he certainly will be at the forefront of interest.
What issues do you think will end up dominating the agenda?
I think the whole issue of geopolitical conflicts, but also don't forget social inclusion, and we will push very much the question of climate change, because we have at the end of this year in Paris this very decisive meeting, not only decisive in terms of whether we really do something about climate change, but decisive in demonstrating that the world is still capable to solve issues which are global challenges in a collaborative way.
You founded the WEF with a mission to improve the state of the world. How would you describe the state of the world today?
We, of course, we are at the moment with all what we have seen in Paris and so on, we have a tendency to be pessimists. But if I compare the state of the world today with the state of the world in '71 when I created the forum, and if you take figures like poverty, like life expectancy, like the health situation, even if you take the figure how many people live today in democracies, we are living in a better world.